Thank you all for being here. My name is Brian Henning. I'm a professor of philosophy and environmental studies here at Gonzaga and the director of the Gonzaga Institute for Climate, Water, and the Environment. And this is part of our For Our Common Home lecture series. I'm really glad to be, for the first time, well, second time over here at the law school. So it's really nice to be here again. A couple of introductory bits before we get to today's event. So one thing to note is that this event is co-sponsored by our friends at the law school. The Law Clinic, as you'll be learning tonight, is a new collaboration between the Climate Institute, which is a university-wide academic project, and the law school. And we're partnering on the clinic, and so we're really grateful to Associate Dean McPeak and Dean Rooksby and all of law school faculty for partnering with us on this important work. It's really already been impactful, as you'll find. We have a couple more events this semester. We have one of our civil engineering faculty who are going to be presenting some of their research on lightweight architecture later this month. That will be in the Hemmingson Auditorium, our regular location, as well as online. And then on April 7th, an event not to be missed in the ballroom in the Hemmingson Center, I'll be hosting Terry Tempest Williams, renowned author, famous book, for example, Refuge, if you've read her work. She just came out with a new book called The Glorians, so that'll be a really great opportunity to hear her do a reading and to hear from that really well-respected, famous author. And then a topic that has been a regular feature for us and a point of conversation for a number of years on campus, for over a decade. Gonzaga students have been calling on their university to divest from fossil fuels. And so we'll be having a Zoom event on fossil fuel divestment, and it's as a fidelity to our Catholic Jesuit humanistic mission with Drs. DeLeo and Los on April 13th. That will be a Zoom-only event. They're wanting to keep their footprint small by not traveling here, and so that'll be on Zoom. And then our final event of the semester will be April 20th, Earth Week. We'll be hosting an event with the Institute for Informatics and Applied Technology on AI, climate change, and energy demand. Can we both meet the intense energy needs of artificial intelligence while also meeting our climate goals? Is it possible to do both of those at the same time? So we'll have a wonderful panel on April 20th to round out this semester. As you might imagine, hosting these types of events do take resources, and so if you have some to share with us to help us to continue to have these events, make them free, make it so that we can live stream them. It's a great resource. If you haven't gone to our YouTube library before, all of these are recorded and put on our YouTube for free, and you can use them and continue viewing them. So send us some love. If you have some to share, we would be very grateful. And so with that, it's my pleasure to announce our conversation partners for tonight. The first in the middle here is Vanessa Waldref. She is co-director of Gonzaga's Environmental and Climate Law Clinic and a partner and founding member of Singleton Schreiber's Washington office. In 2021, she was presidentially appointed as United States Attorney for the Eastern District of Washington, where she was the first woman to hold that role. During her tenure, she co-launched the region's environmental task force, led national efforts on environmental justice, built strong partnerships with federal, state, local, and tribal law enforcement to make communities safer and more resilient. Join me in welcoming Vanessa Waldref. Our second panelist is Dan Fruchter. Dan is a co-director of Gonzaga's Environmental and Climate Law Clinic as well, and a founding member of Singleton Schreiber's Washington office. From 2021 to 2025, Dan served as the chief of the Fraud and White-Collar Crime Division of the United States Attorney's Office for the Eastern District of Washington, where he co-launched the first ever federal environmental task force in Eastern Washington and built a nationally recognized fraud practice focused on serving the community and holding powerful corporate and individual wrongdoers accountable. Join me in welcoming Dan Fruchter. And finally, we have a student who will be asking them questions, and the student is Jessica Vai. She's a 3L here at Gonzaga Law School and is currently a student intern in the Environmental and Climate Law Clinic. Jessica is from Yakima, Washington, and earned a Bachelor of Business Administration here at Gonzaga's undergraduate campus. Her law school experience is varied. She is the managing editor of the Gonzaga Law Review. She also served as a law clerk for the U.S. Attorney's Office here in Spokane, where she initially met Dan and Vanessa, and has second chaired 2 federal trials as a student. Jessica also serves as a co-president of the Criminal Law Society and a peer mentor for first-year law students. Postgraduate in the fall, she'll be clerking for the federal magistrate judge Alexander Ekstrom. Join me in welcoming Jessica. So if everything is working correctly, the little mic in front of you should be working, and so I'll leave it to you three to have a good conversation, and then we'll have some Q&A after they're done.
I am so excited to be here tonight. Thank you guys for having Dan and Vanessa, two of my biggest mentors ever. We've got some questions, so I'll just get started with our first question. What motivated each of you to transition from leadership roles at the Department of Justice to private practice and academic clinic leadership?
Do I go first?
Yes.
So what motivated me to leave the Justice Department after 21 years of federal service that I'm eternally grateful for was Vanessa. One amazing thing about working at the Department of Justice is you get to work with tons of incredible people. But there's only a few people that you come across in your career, if you're as lucky as I am, who not only exemplify just incredible leadership, incredible energy, and just a can-do and really caring spirit. And just the things that she was able to accomplish for the district, which is, I think, 1.2 million people in Eastern Washington, and for our office was just incredible. And so when the opportunity came to follow her into private practice, I was incredibly excited to do that because I knew that it was the best opportunity I'd ever have to continue doing what I went to law school, became a lawyer, and became a public servant in the first place to do, which is serve the community, try to make a positive difference, and try to impact in a good way the world around us. So very simple.
You're kind. Thank you, Dan. I was also in the Department of Justice for many years, and that was an extraordinary part of my career. In the final tail end, I was an assistant United States attorney for several years, and then the trial attorney with the Environment and Natural Resources Division for DOJ before I got to be the U.S. attorney. And that was a role where you are able to convene the community and to identify priorities to really make a difference. And you get to lead an office with extraordinary people like Dan and decide how do we use the resources that we have to make the biggest impact that we can. And one of the things that we'll talk about a little bit more is how we put together an environmental task force, really combining resources throughout the community to look at what we can do to really make a difference. And the Department of Justice was a space where I felt like I had, I'm an institutionalist, and that was using an institution to be able to effectuate change. And when you're the U.S. attorney, you definitely know you have a timeline that you're going to be leaving. And so when the change of administration went into effect, I knew that my time was short. I had 3 weeks into the current administration before all the U.S. attorneys were asked to step down. And the hope that I had in moving into private practice was to use the power of the private sector, because I love institutions, but man, they move slow sometimes, and you need nudges from the outside to make sure that they can be held accountable and that they can be moving towards justice. So I loved being within the Department of Justice, and right now I kind of love being outside of the Department of Justice, challenging it to do more work that it really can do. I loved working with people there, but also that it needs to be held accountable to hold to be responsive to the public, because really when you're a public servant, you serve everyone in the community, and that's what we need to expect of our institutions as well. The other piece of climate being able to move into clinic leadership is that, like, Dan and I both led the intern program where we got to work with awesome students like Jessica at the U.S. Attorney's Office. And so having a law firm where we got to do kind of that awesome private sector work, where we'll talk a little bit more about what we do in that capacity, but also being able to teach and to be able to work with our awesome clinic students, many of whom who are here today, reminds you of the lawyer that you want to be and the lawyer that, like, every day I want to show up in my office and say, like, oh, like, this is how it should be done and how I can show up for both the students that I'm trying to, show what a lawyer can be, and then also for my firm and for my community. So that was kind of my why in leaving the DOJ, was to be able to use everything I learned in the Department of Justice to continue to pursue justice in the private sector, and to get this awesome energy from students and the environment here at Gonzaga to make a difference.
Okay. How does your experience in federal enforcement shape the way that you approach environmental advocacy today?
Is that me again?
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think the need for accountability is something that I just think about all the time. And that's because I spent 21 years trying to hold powerful people who thought the rules didn't apply to them accountable. Whether, you're talking about like a doctor who's putting, profits before patients, whether you're talking about a company that is violating environmental laws, whether you're talking about a landlord that's exploiting tenants or a boss that's exploiting workers. Like, the common thread, right, is you've got folks who are powerful. They think that the rules don't apply to them. The thing about white collar fraud or corporate crime is, like, there is a cost benefit analysis, right? Like, people think that they're going to get away with it, and even if they get caught, it'll be a slap on the wrist. And so, unlike other kinds of crime, I think there really is like a thought process, whether it's conscious or subconscious, of like, well, this is what you do. This is how you get ahead. This is how you, this is how you succeed in this world by, the metrics that the world sets out. And so I think all the time about, like, well, what's the need for accountability? Whenever we talk about, like, okay, there's a rule in place, it's like, well, what are the consequences if you don't follow the rule? Is there an actual enforcement mechanism in place? Does that enforcement mechanism work the way that it's supposed to? If you have a regulatory agency, is that regulatory agency captured by the industry, or are they functioning in an independent way? Are they informed by science, or are they informed by, lobbyists talking in their ear? I think all the time, because of my background doing civil and criminal enforcement, about sort of like, how do we use the law to hold powerful people accountable, to hold powerful companies accountable, and when I say accountable, like, it's about being accountable to us, to the people, right? It's not about some academic, like, oh, you did something bad, you should be punished. That's fine. That's not like what motivated me, and that's not what motivates me now. It's like, no, like, we as a community, we need to hold powerful people accountable, because ultimately, like, they're either accountable to us or they're accountable to nobody. That's just kind of how it works. And so, like, that is something that I think I'll continue to carry with me for the rest of my career, and something that I just think about with every case that I work on is sort of, how does this case hold people accountable to the community?
Yeah, and I would speak to also, I mean, being involved in federal enforcement. So the U.S. Attorney's Office and the Department of Justice does both civil and criminal enforcement. And as the, as the U.S. Attorney and our U.S. Attorney's offices, you oversee all of the federal criminal indictments. But then you also are moving forward with civil affirmative casework as well as defensive work. And something that I loved when we were in government is working with folks at the EPA or at the Forest Service who have deep knowledge of the environment. Like, there's amazing scientists and amazing folks who just dedicated their whole careers to public service and are advising you on, this is how, like, the laws should be, this is how we can protect the environment, or any area, Department of Energy, how we ensure that people are safe, how workers are safe. And again, kind of going back to like institutionalists and how those systems are in place to protect workers and the community. And being a part of federal enforcement, you really get to see, oh, like these systems are in place to make sure that the rules are followed and that we're all kept safer. I really appreciated when we were in the last few years when I got to be in a leadership role to focus on environmental criminal enforcement, and that was a space where it goes outside of just, well, this is the cost of doing business, to like have a violation where there's a slap on the wrist, and the penalties involved in some environmental civil suits are not huge. And so it truly is like, well, like what's the risk? Why does it matter to corporate entities to really hold themselves to a higher standard when it's much more expensive? So the temptations are very, kind of one-sided, like, well, like if no one else is following the rules, why should I? And it becomes kind of a race to the bottom of who can do the bare minimum to make the most money. And when we got to, and I always have Dan's voice in my ears, like, how do we hold people accountable? Like, otherwise it's not real enforcement if there's no reason, there's no hook to really making people follow the law. And so EPA has a kind of variety of different both civil administrative enforcement and then a criminal enforcement team. And we got to work really closely with the folks at the national level who wanted to prioritize criminal enforcement. And that was a really big shift in the last administration. And we got to kind of lead that charge to really hold individuals accountable who were violating those laws. And that sends a strong message that this isn't just the cost of doing business. It's really going to be, against the standards that we have set, that Congress has set for the public, to allow us to be safer and for our communities to be safer. So I really saw the power of criminal enforcement and was, so excited by the ways that sent a strong message about what we care about and what we prioritize. So then that, I guess what that sends us to in private practice is like, oh, I missed that. We don't get to do that anymore, but we still get to bring cases that are holding companies accountable financially, and where hitting companies in their pocketbooks is another strong incentive to try to ensure that there is better compliance. And that's a space that we learned a lot about what it takes to hold large corporations accountable. You kind of need to focus on all the different levers of power.
Yeah, did y'all know that all these federal agencies have their own law enforcement? So like EPA has criminal agents, Fish and Wildlife, Forest Service, there's tree cops, bird cops, landfill cops, the whole thing. And it's like, so that's the system we have. Like Congress in their infinite wisdom set up these agencies. Like there are agents that are responsible for doing this. They're experts not only in criminal investigations, but in criminally investigating these specific types of environmental crimes. It's this amazing system that does exist, and it became like a really fun exercise. And how does how can this these folks who are already doing this job, how can we kind of bring them together and bring their efforts to bear in a way that really benefits the community, and how can we have the greatest impact on the community by pulling these shared resources and common values and different expertise. So it was it was just a really awesome opportunity, and like something new that we learned every day about exciting ways to make a difference.
Yeah, and because I feel like a lot of people don't necessarily know about all the different tools and resources within the federal government and within all these different agencies. So there's kind of like these, people know about the EPA and they know about how that is a portion of environmental law. But there's so many ways that the U.S. Attorney's Office or other federal agencies are involved in environmental work. And we'd have cases in our national forests where there were illegal marijuana grows, and so people are like, marijuana, does that matter? that's like torching the environment. There would be, pesticides that are impacting our communities there. It's impacting the wildlife. It's impacting folks who want to enjoy the, campsites and the water there. There's so much littering that is left from those types of illegal grows. Pesticides also impacting farm workers. If there are, that's impacting in Eastern Washington, we have, a huge agricultural community that's so reliant on, healthy workers being able to pick fruit that keeps our economy going. And so ensuring that, those workplace protections are present, and that we're ensuring that the environmental regulations are protecting everyone. So there's so many different ways that environmental protection really is about public health and ensuring that everyone in our community is kept safe.
Okay, moving on to the environmental clinic, what gap were you hoping to fill with Gonzaga Law's newly established Environmental and Climate Law Clinic?
Well, the biggest gap I was trying to fill is the gap in my heart of getting to work with law students at the U.S. Attorney's Office for 20 years at DOJ. I just love working with law students, and I learned so much working with them. One of the last trials that I did with a law student, not Jess, but one of her colleagues, and it was an incredible experience. I learned so much, and it was a case that was out of my normal area of expertise. It was a death threat case that just happened to fall into my lap, and I got to work it with a law student, and it was an incredible experience. And so I wanted to continue working with students, and I think when I was in law school, I had the opportunity to do the environmental law clinic at my law school, the University of Maryland, and I got to see firsthand, the incredible work that we were able to do, pesticide litigation. We had a case involving depleted uranium, air emissions from industrial facilities in socioeconomically disadvantaged neighborhoods. Just incredible work, and I always tell the students, and I don't know if y'all yet believe me, but there's something to be said for just a bunch of students that have something that's just a passion project. They're just doing it for credit. They don't need to show a revenue stream. They don't need to balance it with there's no expectation of getting a sentence or getting a particular judgment or anything like that. They're just doing it for doing it and for the experience. And companies get scared when they see the clinic on the other side, because they know that it's going to be made up of folks who are passionate, who are willing to put in the time to really do an exceptional job for clients. And so there really isn't anything like it. And having had the opportunity to do it when I was in law school, when the opportunity came up to help direct the clinic here, I just jumped at the opportunity.
Yeah, similarly, I loved working with students at the U.S. Attorney's Office, and taught environmental law for many years as an adjunct here at Gonzaga. And it was always, after you work all day, and then you came here and did a 3-hour class, and so you're wiped out at the end, but I'd always be fired up at the same time, because it's so fascinating. I love the law, and I love working with students to understand how can we use the law as a tool for social good and social change. And the clinic in particular, I was really excited for this opportunity. I had brainstormed with the dean and with Dr. Henning about how can we make this collaboration between the Climate Institute, which I've been so impressed with the incredible work of the Climate Institute to study right here in Spokane, what can we do to make a difference? And the law clinic and the Institute working together really is this amazing opportunity to think about, one, having it be very focused on what can we do right here in Spokane, using Gonzaga's deep commitment to the community, and then also using legal policy tools and casework, and thinking about things in a bigger problem-solving way. And we'll talk about this a little bit more with how I love thinking about, okay, what is this problem and how do we best approach it? Is this a litigation problem? Is this a policy problem? What's the fix here? Is it a community organizing problem? Do we just need to have more consumer awareness around an issue? And so like the opportunity to work with students who are super excited about how we can make a difference and how to use law as a tool for social change is really a space where I'm so thrilled that we have the law school engagement and then also the collaboration with the Institute to be able to have it really be multidisciplinary.
Yeah, I mean, one of my favorite things about working at DOJ was working with agents, and like the reason is because they're not lawyers, so like they don't think like lawyers, and so like when you put like a lawyer and a non-lawyer together, sometimes like magic things happen because like you're approaching these problems from different perspectives and like brainstorming, and so like the interdisciplinary nature of the clinic and the fact that we do have the opportunity to collaborate with with the Climate Institute and with undergrad students and with different disciplines within the university, it really is special. And especially in environmental and climate, it's critically important, right? That like lawyers have their use, I suppose, but it's really important that they be informed by experts. And, that's something that, we have the opportunity, obviously, in our casework to work with a lot of experts. But I think there's sort of this built-in expertise having the university and the Climate Institute here that we just benefit from every day. And I think that collaboration has been terrific, and it'll only get better and produce better results for the community as it deepens.
Yeah, and I always make the reference, when I was in law school, I was really passionate about the environment, but I was kind of daunted about, can I do environmental law? It's technical. I don't have a science background. I'm a people person. I work with people. And so like that sociology background versus a scientific background. And, everyone hears about these famous cases like the Chevron case. It's about like, where do you set the amount of benzene that is like acceptable to be in the air? So I would, for all the students who are out there, don't be intimidated that you need to be, so scientifically like precise and accurate. So much of these standards are based on like what we as a community decide to be like, well, what is safe? We get to decide how safe is, and we have really, really smart experts who can advise you. So if you want to be an advocate around, environmental protection, don't hold yourself back because of a lack of technical expertise in any particular area. Like, you have smart people around you who can help with that, and what you need is to understand how to talk to people effectively in order to make change.
Vanessa, I've heard you say that certain problems will require an all-hands-on-deck approach. What do you mean by that, and how do you harness the full spectrum of legal and advocacy tools to address these problems?
I was joking with Jess earlier that if I wrote a book, it would be like all hands on deck, or if a podcast, the title would be all hands on deck. I would use it all the time as the U.S. attorney because there's so many problems that need to have a multifaceted solution. When I was U.S. attorney, I'd often refer to like the opioid crisis with that frame because it's so complicated, where we have addiction and international drug trafficking and all of the challenges there. Like, whoa, do we need an all hands on deck approach? And I think the climate challenge is very similar to that. I mean, approaching these big multifaceted problems, we need to not feel like we have to do everything, but think about like, what can we do? What certain gifts and talents do we have in order to attack that problem? And what we have explored in the clinic before is, we'll read in the spokesman review, like, what is an environmental issue that like we're seeing? We have so many in our community. Like, think about the West Plains and the PFAS issues. So is that a challenge where there could be a lawsuit? And there's lots of lawsuits that are going on there. How do we focus on that? Is that a policy change? Does there need to be a scientific solution for alternatives to how we can fight fires without having these dangerous chemicals? So looking at things from all these different approaches and thinking about, well, what tools do I have to try to advocate for like what's in my zone? And so the all hands on deck approach is recognizing that everyone has different gifts to bring, and we also want to make sure that we have all the right people at the table when we're brainstorming ideas together. I think that often we can be too focused on like, well, there's this litigation and it's a narrow issue. But if we can broaden our views to focus on goals also rather than partisan politics, I think often we get kind of trapped. Like the fact that we talk about climate as a political issue rather than like how do we all come together around public health and focus on what will save lives in our community, that's where we can get all hands on deck. And so whenever there are ways that we can kind of depoliticize, bring folks together and make sure that we're not leaving any gifts and talents at the table that can be brought to bear. That's what I think we can do here. And that's why I really love how the clinic is multidisciplinary, excuse me, and where bringing in like fresh ideas from science approaches and legal approaches are all going to be really valuable tools for us to address.
Yeah, I would also say, I mean, I think that's 100% right. I mean, all hands on deck it's necessary, right? Like most problems don't get solved when half the people are saying, well, there isn't a problem, or actually the problem's good, or what are you talking about? And so like I think those things are necessary. I also think like, I mean, the having people take ownership, right? Like all hands on deck is also a command. It's also a motivating tool. It's like, no, this is your problem. If you own a timber company, you should care about wildfires, and you do. And so like, what are you gonna do to help solve it? If you're a commercial fisherman, like you obviously have a big stake in what happens to our clean water. So like, what are you gonna do about it? If you're a hunter, like you should care about our public lands. And so like, you need to do something about it. Like it's not good enough to just like stand and complain. Like this is an all hands on deck situation. If you're a farmer in Eastern Washington, you care about climate change. Even if you don't believe it, like it's affecting you, whether you want to talk about it or not. And so it's like, no, this is your problem too. And so I think it can be like a command, a motivating tool, as well as like a necessary function for solving these problems. Of course, it's easier said than done. Like the nice thing about being, the U.S. attorney or like in charge of an office is like the people that work for the office kind of have to do what you say. Although in the federal government, not really. But like there is a command structure, right? And so like that doesn't translate beautifully to like other situations, right? Where there's it can sometimes be a challenge to accomplish that like same sense of like shared ownership that you have within a company where everyone has like the same mission statement, even if they have drastically different ideas about like how to get there.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And that's where, how do we communicate with each other around what our goals are? And I think that if you can try to find, like, what is the shared goal? Like, we all want our community to be safer. We all want our kids to be able to, go to school and be able to play outside because the air is clean enough and have, safe access to water. So if we can kind of find those motivating factors that we can agree on that are, like, policy goals, that's going to be a lot more effective in many situations than kind of more narrow, what might appear to be partisan issues.
Going back to you, Dan, you co-founded the Eastern Washington Environmental Task Force. Why was that important, and what can you share about building effective partnerships among government agencies?
Yeah, I mean, it was, I talked a little bit about the different, federal law enforcement agencies. We also were blessed to have, involvement from the four Native American tribes in the Eastern District of Washington that are federally recognized. We also had the state of Washington, as part of our task force, and we had local government. We had the city of Spokane Regional Clean Air Agency, and other local governments. So it really was a very collaborative effort. And I mean, for me, it was a learning experience to hear about all the amazing work that people are doing, because we don't always know, like, people get pigeonholed about like, oh, like I'm working harder than everyone else. I'm doing everything. And like, so it was, useful for me to just hear about all the amazing things that people are doing, and just the breadth of experience and the breadth of work that is being done to keep our community safe and healthy. So like, that was just terrific learning experience for me. I think the people at the agencies that participated, like, I think there was a real takeaway of like shared values. And I think sometimes we give like short shrift to some of those things because like we don't want to talk about like these shared values are like these moral issues, but like these are moral issues. Like our public health is a moral issue. Like whether our children will inherit like a safer, a healthier world or a less healthy world, like that's a moral issue. And like you don't have to be on a soapbox, you don't have to be an environmentalist to like care about that. Everyone cares about their kids. Everyone cares about their grandkids. Everyone cares about their families and their neighbors and their friends and their community. And so like I think getting the agencies together and talking about like what are these shared values and what are the different ways that we can work collaboratively to advance some of those values, it was a really special experience.
Yeah, it was like a really, really awesome way to kind of break down silos too, because there's, local level, state level, federal level, and when you bring all the folks in the same room, then you understand like, oh, like you're looking at the same issues that we're looking at. Like how can we either pool resources if that's appropriate, or when we're always in a world of limited resources. So if you know that there's a particularly dangerous situation or bad actor, then you can focus your efforts accordingly. And so that was a just amazing experience to be able to be in a room with so many focused people who are focused on doing the right thing, and then how excited they were to be with each other and understand what the different resources and tools were. And that's something that I'm so proud that Dan and I were able to put together, and that we as an office were able to kind of focus on like, okay, like this is an enforcement priority that we're going to be able to show up for, and then we delivered as well in making our community know that like, yeah, like we put our resources where our mouths are, and saying like, yes, this is not only are we talking about it, but we're taking action on these cases. And just Dan did an incredible job in leading the charge there, and really building that trust within all of our different federal enforcement and state enforcement entities.
What skills are most critical for undergraduate or law students who want to protect environmental and public health?
I mean, I think I don't know if this is a skill, but like, attitude is everything. I mean, like that optimism, that can-do spirit is just critically important. I mean, there's a lot of problems out there. I don't know if y'all have looked out the window or picked up a newspaper recently, but like there's a lot of stuff that I think everyone agrees could be going better. Whether they agree about how it could be going better or how it's gone so wrong, no. But it doesn't take like a giant leap to understand like, oh, like things are not doing as well as they could for the people who are most in need of a better situation. And so like I think just waking up with the optimism and that kind of can do, like, no, like I'm going to be a force for positivity. I'm going to be a force for positive change, not like in a just only attitudinal way, right? Not just like, oh, everything's wonderful. Like, what do you mean, la la la? But like actually like being willing to like roll up your sleeves and do the hard work, and the understanding that like it's not going to be easy. I mean, litigation takes forever. And environmental cases in particular, like, I mean, years is not enough. Like, some of them are decades. We have, members of our firm that have literally been litigating the same case for, 20 years in some cases? I mean, it is, it's just grindingly slow. But, like, these are the tools that we have, right? And so it's like, you analogize them to, like, any other tool that you have to do a job. Like, good, bad, or indifferent, like the government, the law, our agencies, like these are the tools that we have to try to make things better. And we need to. Like, failure is not an option. Like, things have to get better. We have to figure out ways, like, by simple fact that the population continues to grow, right? We have to find ways to, like, make, our planet safer and our community safer and healthier, because there are people that depend on us to do that. And so, like, I think just having that attitude is just critically important in a lot of things, but especially in environmental law, because things do move slowly, and it's hard to see the progress while you're in it. It's just it can feel like a grind, and it can feel like one step forward, two steps back. But I think if you are able to kind of take that longer view and think about, like, well, what can I wake up and do today that's going to make a positive impact? I think that can take you a long way.
Yeah, I would say, like, similarly, it's that both, like, a positive approach of, like, okay, I can do something, and also, like, not making, like, the perfect be the enemy of good, or even, like, good being the enemy of something. It's like, what can I do? What is one thing I can do? I, as a perfectionist myself, that often can be paralyzing, because it's like, oh, there are so many problems. Like, I don't even know where to start until I have it all figured out. Like, what's the point of this? Step one. And, sometimes it's good to have a plan, and it's good to kind of, like, put something into place that's not like, I'll do this and that, and, kind of feeling all over the place. But really, it's just keeping on trying and not giving up and not feeling overwhelmed that, everything in, the New York Times climate news is like, oh no, there's more terribleness, it's already too late. So we have to be in a space of, like, okay, well, like, I'm here, I can do something. What is that something that I can do? And there's no one perfect plan. If there was one perfect plan that somebody had hatched out, like, we'd be doing that and we wouldn't be where we are. So just trying to figure out, like, trust some people who can be your accountability mechanisms around, okay, this is something that I care about. How do I make it not miserable? So maybe I can hang out with other people that I like to do. So, are there projects that, like, I can work on with Dan to help, like, move them forward, and, like, I can be accountable to somebody so to make sure that, like, we can make it happen. So, like, finding a group, finding a community, and problem solving the best you can within that space to be able to make that change so that you can, start feeling like, okay, there's bit by bit we can really make a difference.
And Vanessa alluded to this a little bit, but I mean, just being a little more practical and a little less esoteric, I mean, just being able to collaborate and work with a lot of different people with different backgrounds, I think is really important for environmental law. Any kind of environmental advocacy work, it's just critically important. Like, we can't do these things alone. We talked about experts, but, like, we just can't do these things alone, right? Like, they're too complicated. They take too long. They are just too involved, and there's too much very well-funded opposition, right? And so, like, these aren't things that, like, you can do on your own. And so being able to seek out and find collaborators who are like-minded, being able to communicate with people that come from different backgrounds, being able to work with people that see problems, like, drastically differently from how you are, it's not always the easiest thing to do, but it's, like, critically important. And it's how you get good results, is by pooling those not only different areas of expertise, but also just, like, different approaches to problems. Like, I have tried a lot of cases, but, like, I don't have one hair of the expertise that Vanessa has when it comes to, like, policy work or administratively, like, working within agencies, or the ability to collaborate amongst different governmental entities. And I never will. And, like, if I try to do that, it will just be a giant waste of my time, a frustration for me, and, like, it won't produce a good result for our clients or for the community. So, like, how can I solve that problem? Like, it's either becoming a public policy expert, which I'm not going to do, or, like, working with someone like Vanessa. And, like, I think that it can be carried over to almost any problem. Is, like, you can either try to do it on your own with your own limitations and your own frustrations and your own, just in your own head, or you can broaden the base. And when you do that, it's amazing what can happen. And so I think, like, if you are interested in these topics, like, seeking out other people that are like-minded, figuring out ways to collaborate, even if an issue isn't, like, your personal passion project, but, like, is an opportunity to work with somebody cool or somebody new, like, that can just make a huge difference, and it can be life-changing for you, and it can be life-changing for the community.
Okay, the last question I have for you guys tonight before we open it up is, where do you find hope even when we are faced with so many challenges and what seems like overwhelming policy and enforcement setbacks?
I'll jump in on this one, and we had a great clinic session today, and I got to kind of also borrow from Dr. Henning's kind of approach that gives me so much hope. But certainly, like, where I find hope is like right here in this room. Like, one, we're all here because we care about making a difference. We have our climate and environmental law clinic students here who are, every day working on projects to try to make our community better, which is incredible. And that's a huge kind of part of my why story here too. Like this, I have hope because I get to work with amazing students who are trying to learn how to become advocates for, a better community every day. And so that is like absolutely where it's like I get up in the morning and know like, okay, who do I get to show up for? And that gives me so much energy and excitement. And also like, I love my community so much. I love Spokane. People always say I should work for the Visitors Bureau of Spokane. Like forever when I was in DC working for many years, and I told people like, oh, I'm moving back to Spokane. They're like, of course you are. All you do is talk about Spokane. So what I love so much is like what are the local changes we can make right here? And some of the work that our clinic students are already doing are, we're jumping in on casework, but we're also working on local policy, like local ordinances that are protecting our community from the impact of climate change and of heating of overall like heat impacts in low-income communities. And so like we have students who are talking to city council members and testifying before the state legislature and the local city council about concrete things that we can do that will save people's lives. So that's amazing. Like the work that we can do right now at our clinic and when we just show up to do those small steps really can make a concrete difference in our community.
Yeah, I mean, I've spent a lot of time working with victims of like horrible crimes, and when you do like that kind of work, you get like a little glimpse of their lives, and it's just a tiny glimpse. Of course, you don't like experience what they experienced, but like you do get a little bit of insight into like what it's like to wake up every day and just like not feel, but just like know that like something deeply unfair and horrible has happened, and there's no guarantee that it's going to get better. And like I think it can be daunting, and sometimes like you can have that tendency to think like, how do you like get up and just like do this? Like, how are you able to face your accuser? How are you able to confront people, to stand up in court in front of a bunch of strangers and a judge and lawyers and the person or persons who hurt you and talk about what happened? And it's like, well, there's no alternative, right? Like, we can't be precious about these things. Like, there's so much work to do. And if you're in this room or you're on this Zoom, certainly if you're at this side of the table, like, you're very fortunate. Like, you are operating from a position of extreme power relative to the average person in the world. Like, that's just a fact. And so, like, what are you going to do with that? Like, you won the lottery. You're here. You're in a nice air-conditioned room. Like, what are you going to do with that? Like, are you going to be upset because, like, there's some bad news about, like, what's happening to the ice caps? Like, you can do that. Like, I get it. Like, we all have those, like, mornings, right? But, like, the real question is like, okay, well, you've lucked into this situation where you actually have the opportunity to do something positive, and you have the power and autonomy to actually control at least part of what you're going to do with your day. So like, what are you going to do with that? And so like, there isn't an alternative, right? Like, what's the alternative to like having hope to like make a positive impact? Is like not having hope? Like, how do you like, what's the point? Like, I don't know. I mean, it's easier said than done, but like it does like bear reminding that like, no, like, we're all very lucky, and the real question is like, what do we do with that fortune, and how do we use that to make things better for people that weren't as lucky as we are?
for Jessica feels like, and this is for the people at home, if you're wondering why it's not amplifying, there is no amplification in the room, it's just for the people online. We shouldn't let Jessica off too easily, right? We should ask her a question as well. I'm just, not a particularly hard one, it's just, I'm curious, give you an opportunity to talk about your experience at the clinic so far. I mean, how have you found that experience?
Terrible, right?
I mean, no pressure, just pretend they're not here.
No, I've found it, I honestly probably don't even have the right words for it. It has been an absolute honor to be in the clinic. I'm in my last semester of law school. I'm about to graduate, and I think it's been so inspiring to be working with my peers and with Dan and Vanessa of we are doing things that are making an impact, and we're getting face-to-face time with people that have been impacted by these things going on, and we get to help. And I think it's so powerful. Every day when I sit down and do the work, I feel like I'm making a difference, even though it might be a little thing like researching some case law that's probably kind of boring to read, but that answer that I find is going to help someone. So it's been really awesome, and I'm really excited to see what else we get to do and how the little things become one big final project. It has been an absolute honor. I'm going to get emotional. Oh my gosh. I'm in my feels. I'm sorry.
Let's open it up, and I'm tempted to throw it if another clinic student wanted to keep the good vibes going before we pepper them with hard questions.
We're bad vibes. We'll take bad. We've been in like some tough rooms.
Right. This is a great time. Any other clinic students want to get in?
Those two have testified before, before Washington State. You got to. Not it.
Next name, because they can't see you.
Okay, my name is Heidi. I'm in my second year, and I was really honored to get to be part of this clinic. Like, part of why I wanted to come to Gonzaga was I saw that there might be an environmental law clinic, and environmental law is something that I've been passionate about for a really long time. It's like what I wrote my essay on to come to law school. So just being here is like everything that I imagined. And I'm on the group that's helping write a policy, and it's been so encouraging because the policy is actually like really making it through the city council right now. Like it'll probably be passed this spring while I'm here. So it's just been a really great experience, and it feels like I actually am doing something.
All right, so yeah, again, this is for people at home. But anybody have a question that they'd like to pose to the panel? You were just mentioning your
Part of the panel, Jess.
Oh, no.
Became this space.
Hello, thank you guys for being here. My name is Leah, and I'm a junior in environmental science. I'm also a climate literacy fellow with the Climate Institute. You guys were talking about how you get the chance to work with lots of different community members, including scientists, and how you were intimidated to work with the science that's behind a lot of these policies and cases. As someone who hopes to go into conservation science, I'm wondering how, in your opinion, scientists can use the science that they do to make a difference through law. Because I don't think that's a direct connection to me or to my peers all the time as to how our research can do something that makes a difference.
So since there isn't amplification in here, I'll try and repeat the question. So he is a science student and interested in how scientists can work with the law in order to make a difference?
Yes.
Yeah. All right, that's the question.
Well, as a fellow environmental science undergrad, I will take a run at that. I think it's a great question. I think, one way that I think about it, right, is like science is not this like magic thing that you say like, okay, what's the answer? And I think like people sort of think about it in the context of like, man, I wish like we're all run by scientists, and like that would not be good. Right? Like that is not like this scientific dictatorship would not be like a pleasant like world to live in.
Philosophers.
Yes. Oh, you know my theory on that. But I mean, that said, I mean, that's because like science isn't some like magic answer. It's a way of asking questions, right? So like, I mean, that's what the scientific method is like, well, how do you ask these questions? So I think using a scientific background to interrogate problems, whether it's a conservation problem or whether it's a legal problem, I find to be really helpful in the way that I approach the law. I like to think that I approach it like with a scientific method mindset, and that like I use that way of interrogating the issue, whether it's a company that's violating the law, whether it's a client who needs help, is using that approach. I also think like anything else, right? Like, I mean, scientists should be like approaching these issues with the same like morality and the same results based biases that like we all have, right? It's like science is a tool. Like you don't like wave a hammer around and say like you decide what to hit and like you decide what angle to hit it in. No, like it's a tool. Like it's like a sharp knife that a chef uses. Like you decide like how you're going to apply it, and what guides you isn't science. It's like your morality, it's your conscience, it's your sense of what's right and wrong. So much of the law is just like, it's telling you what you already know is true, right? Like, don't kill somebody, don't steal from somebody. Like, we all know these things, right? And a lot of scientific problems, it's the same. It's using a tool to show this thing that we already know. Like, oh, it would be better if like water didn't make people sick. Like it would be a better planet to live on if like people could rely on the fact that the air that they breathe is going to be healthy, whether you are a, like traditionally healthy person or whether you have asthma or some other respiratory disease. Like it's just as important that like the air be safe for you. Like we know this. And so like, how do you use science to like, to advance those goals? It's use it like any other tool. And it is a really powerful tool, but it's only a tool. Like you have to decide how to apply it, where to apply it, when to apply it, what angle to apply it at, and like ultimately that's dictated by the scientist, not by the science. I will climb off my.
Oh, that was awesome. I was going to go very practical things. When there are public notice and comment opportunities for legislation, like having a scientific input on that is really critical and important. And when there's any new projects that have to go through either a NEPA analysis, which is a Environmental Policy Act requirement to evaluate what are the environmental impacts. Having a scientist weigh in on like, well, I actually do know what the water quality impacts are going to be in this type of situation. That's incredibly valuable, and it should be used to inform how laws are made. So I think through kind of notice and comment, and then amicus briefs. Like we are drafting a amicus brief on behalf of members of Congress right now that are in support of the Solar for All Act that allowed for these huge amounts of environmental funding to invest in solar projects and other energy efficiency projects specifically for low-income communities. So being able to say, oh, I'm an economist, I can show how much like savings will come from these funds being used properly. I can look to the overall health impacts from this. All of that information is so incredibly valuable to informing judges, to informing Congress in all of these different areas of lawmaking.
I have a guess at what you're going to ask, but let's see if I can. Get it up there.
This is a bit of a legal question, I suppose, but I've been wondering for a while, if a presidential candidate asks for $1 billion, is that soliciting a bribe or is that extortion when he goes to big oil?
I was wrong.
The former public servant in me still has no opinion on any political issues for purposes of today, but happy to talk to you offline.
As you alluded to earlier, a lot of environmental law is really kind of aimed at limiting the damage. We have discharge permits and air pollution permits. So the law is actually permitting the damage.
Mm-hmm.
There is around the nation, and we have some people in Washington State that are working on an approach that's known as the Green Amendment. I don't know if the law clinic has dealt with the Green Amendment or not, but the basic idea is that you put into the Constitution, in this case the Washington State Constitution, a provision that says that essentially people have a right to a healthy and clean environment, which then in effect kind of prohibits some of the things that would violate that. I wondered if you had any opinions on that. Wondered if you would be interested in working with me on helping to get it passed in Washington State.
We were actually just talking at clinic today about kind of the origination of environmental laws and regulations, which, it's only most environmental regulations are about 50 years old. It was the 1970s when we had kind of a large push with the Clean Air Act, the Clean Water Act, the National Environmental Policy Act. Those all kind of went into place, and they shifted the baseline, which was basically you can pollute as much as you want with no limits, to having some limits on what is allowed for pollution. And so kind of our baseline entitlement historically has been, everyone has the right to pollute all they want, and now we have some restrictions that, requires permits or puts limitations on that front. So I think it's very interesting to kind of try to flip that baseline and have the baseline be that right for individuals to have access to clean air, to have access to clean water. Our legal framework in the United States is tough because our baseline has been a different entitlement framework for a long time, but I think it's very powerful, both like rhetorically, to think about it that way. It's like, well, don't I have these baseline rights? And a lot of that's been explored in some of the climate litigation when in the Montana lawsuit, where a lot of young people said, don't I have a right to a future with clean air and not having the climate impacts? So those have been started to be explored in court a little bit more, and so that's your big thinking opportunities for everyone in this room of like, well, how do we want to shift the baseline for what our entitlements can be, and what do we want our shared resources and goals to be focused on?
Yeah, I mean, so much of law, right, comes down to my rights versus yours, right? Where does my right to conduct my business and do whatever I want to my land run into your right as the person who lives next door or is downstream or whatever? And so I think by recognizing those rights, right, you inherently create a new dynamic where, no, it's not about this polluter versus the government. Can they get a permit? What does the permit say? What is the government's right of enforcing that permit or anything like that? But restoring it to really what it should be, which is it's my rights versus yours. That's what the law is all about, is balancing those things and sort of interrogating where my rights end and your rights begin. So I think it's a really important effort to think about not only for people that are currently living, right, but people that are too young to litigate on their own, people that aren't yet born, future generations. I don't think it's crazy to think about the rights that other non-human animals on the planet have. I think that those things are all very worth interrogating and all worth thinking about. And the fact that the law doesn't currently contemplate that isn't a reason to ignore them. It's a reason to interrogate. Well, why is that? And is there an opportunity to change it?
Before we go into our next question, if someone did want to propose work, is there a way that they can contact the clinic and submit requests for assistance? What is just the practical way that someone would, what would they do? What would Larry do next if you wanted to bother you more formally? We love hearing from prospective clients or collaborators. And so we've got, the clinic has an email address. We've also got, we're more than happy to have folks reach out to us anytime. We'd love to set up a meeting with the students where we can, talk more in depth and see if there's something that we can work on together or something that we can help y'all with. Go to a student here.
My name is Caleb, and I'm a freshman over at Gonzaga. As an undergraduate, I study international business and public policy. And a talked about the need for all hands on deck, and I think it's kind of a persistent characteristic of people that we're pretty impatient, and now that we have 24-hour news cycles and unlimited social media feeds, and you have that reward things like whether it's airstrikes or like new developments in the scandal, environmentalism tends to, at least from my understanding, a lot of the effects take years, decades, even centuries to fully be seen. So I guess, what are your thoughts on how to sell environmentalism in a political and media climate that rewards very like short-sighted, very immediate content?
I guess I would interrogate that concept, right? And what I mean by that is I actually think people care deeply about the environment. Of course, like the news cycle is what the news cycle is. But I think if you ask people like, well, what motivates you? What do you care about? I don't think people care about whatever the latest development is in the news cycle. I do think like there's an incredible like common shared environmental goals. What I think is the problem isn't that people don't care enough. I think it's that we have systems and structures in place that don't reflect the actual values that people hold. And I think there are many studies out there to that effect. I think Princeton did a landmark study not that long ago that sort of showed like, look, there's no correlation between what people want and what our like supposed republic is producing. There is an incredible correlation between like what powerful moneyed interests want and what our democracy is producing. So like, how do we fix that problem? And so like, there's always a need for more outreach and more awareness, and like, of course, like it is important to think about like how do we capture people's imaginations. But I also think like, no, people are worried about climate change. Like people do care about these things. The problem isn't like a lack of caring. It's a hopelessness and like how do I translate my values into something that's reflected by the community writ large? And I think the structures and systems that we have in place are just inadequate to do that. And it's less a function of our collective will and more a function of like how do we translate that into a system that's more reflective of what we all collectively value.
Yeah, I mean, I think you've identified a lot of those systemic challenges, like when we have politicians who need to run on a 2-year cycle, then, what quick results do we have? And I think we do have a tough time identifying, like, okay, like, how do we plan these long-term efforts? I think that there are some strategies that have been effective, and some of that is like, well, it's maybe not going to be like quick legislation, but like, what if we're giving like grant funding to entities to do research that matters over the long term? Are there like long-term investments? And it might not be, that's where like there's limitations on enforcement. Like, well, like if we have like a very specific enforcement piece, like that's one case in a bigger picture. But when there's been kind of a lot that's stalled out in Congress because we can't pass new legislation, a lot of environmental efforts is actually done through providing money to organizations that are investing in long-term solar energy or other energy efficiency. And so kind of like thinking outside of the box from where do we choose to maybe it is still legislation. It's legislation that's giving money to different groups, but then it's kind of the different strategies when Congress is stalled out in terms of ever, we're grappling with the endangerment finding right now, which is kind of identifying like, are we going to be able to have the Clean Air Act regulate to protect against climate change? So like, we're trapped in this little model of like, we have the Clean Air Act that was from the 1970s with some amendments, and that's like, we're trying to fit everything we possibly can within that act. And it feels very like a scarcity and tight. So how do we do that? And maybe it's actually through like, well, right now that's a stuck model. Congress isn't going to be able to get any new environmental legislation passed that way. But if we instead give, $5 billion to investing in these new opportunities or tax credits for corporations to like shift their policies, that's where the change is actually going to happen. So trying to think outside of the box and think about where can we make these long-term investments for long-term change.
think we'll call it there. This has been such a great introduction to the work of the clinic. It's just been a pleasure to be able to collaborate with you. We've only been going a semester and a half, and already seeing what's possible when we have these interesting collaborations between the law school and university-wide academic institutes. So stay tuned. Look for opportunities to engage with the clinic if you're in the region. Come to our next event, which is coming up soon. Go to gonzaga.edu/climate events. Thanks so much for being here, and see you next time.
Good job, Jess.
Should have been ready for that question.